And welcome back. Got a solar update for you. I know it's been a little while since we posted a solar video. And this is in reference to what you see here. Got you in a tripod and zoomed in on one of the 280 amp hour cells that we put into service, if you remember, earlier this year. What this is in reference to is the connections for the bus bars to the battery terminals. Now these are the standard bus bars that seem to accompany just about all of these, bigger 280 amp hour, 230 amp hour, and probably even the 300 something ish amp hour ones they have now. But if you remember in the previous videos, we were troubleshooting some issues in which we were adding washers and lock washers and things of that nature to these bus bars, because according to the Lithium software and the LongMon, because we have a LongMon monitor on each cell of the bank, and we can see in a visual graph in real time the status of each cell. And what we were seeing was when the pack would be under 50, 60 plus amps worth of draw, heavy load out, one cell would all of a sudden start to plummet, where it would be 10, 11, 12 millivolts out from the rest of the cells in the pack. And when we looked into it, we would notice the terminal would be warm because we had a bad connection, meaning a high resistance connection, which is going to generate heat, which could generate a problem if gone on too long. So what we would find out is that we would either have to tighten down this little Allen set. This is a little bit longer than the ones they give you, but it's the same thing. We'd have to either tighten down this Allen set screw a little bit tighter, or tighten down the serrated flange nut that came with it, or as you saw in some of our other videos, put a washer underneath of it or put a lock washer on it to help it bite into this bus bar a bit better. Well, I was recently watching one of Lithium Solar's videos, and what I noticed is on one of his videos he was demoing, I believe it was, if I remember correctly, a DIY battery that you could buy from a company that gave you basically all the pieces, and you could construct the battery yourself, which was kind of a cool idea. And what they used in their construction was these little button bolts or screws you see here, these M6 8mm button head screws. So I ordered some of these in, kind of wanting to try them out, thinking they might be a good replacement for all of those studs and serrated nuts, and having to deal with all of that and some of the connection issues coming with it. So this is an M6 by 8mm kind of button style hex screw or bolt, probably more like a screw. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to once this catches into some threads, there we go. I'm going to start counting from here because it just started. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5, and it's at the bottom of the threads within the battery. And there's just maybe one thread worth of exposure before the head of this top of this screw, again, or bolt, touches the actual surface of that terminal. So that gives you a little bit of room to get a bus bar in there. But just like Lithium Solar commented, for me, that wasn't really much meat to bite into that terminal with. So if you're going to have things like BMS with an eyelet attached to it and things of that nature, you may not have enough threads off an 8mm as far as the length to kind of be comfortable. And to show you what I mean is if we put the standard bus bar in there, again with no lock washer or nothing else, we do that same process. Now it's bit at that point, so that'd be 1, 2. What I'm doing, I'm looking at the top of the Allen key here. 3, 4. So it's about 4.5, give or take, and then it tightens down onto the bus bar. So if you put a lock washer or a flat washer or an eyelet underneath that, it would be, a few threads less. So with that in mind, I went out and also found on Amazon these guys you see here. again, Allen based. Now they're not the mushroom caps, so they don't have as big a shoulder on them, but they're 10 millimeter in length, and you can get them in a pack of 50, or at least in this case. And I'll have a link in the description of where I found these on Amazon. And you don't see it in the package here, but they do also give you a little cheap Allen key with it as well. Kind of nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this one out. The nice thing about those other Allen bolts is that they do take a little bit thicker of an Allen key, so you get a little bit more grab on it. But without the bus bar, we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to thread it till it starts right there. It just started to thread in. And what I'm doing, as I said, I'm looking at the top, so I'm making that straight. I'm looking at the top of the Allen key, and every time it makes a full rotation, and then that's 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I could go maybe 5 1/4. And you can see how much more gap that you have between the head, between the bottom of the head of this Allen screw versus the base of the terminal. So you've got a lot more room in there. Matter of fact, I can put that bus bar in there, and there's still a gap between that bus bar and the shoulder of that fastener. So that gives you more than enough room, or if you had like an eyelet, or if you wanted to put a lock washer or a flat washer, something along that nature in there, you'd be able to do it, still go through this, and still have plenty of purchase on the inside thread of here. In other words, being able to make that good physical connection. So what you're going to see me splice into this video is that we've already gone through earlier today and replaced all of our studs and those serrated flange nuts and everything we were doing before. We pulled them all off of the current 32 cells that we have in service, and we replaced it with the following. So what I found worked good in my case was bus bar, M6 flat stainless steel washer to go on top of that. I'm just going to simulate the Longmon wiring connection because it has an eyelet about that thick. And then, last but not least, once I find one here in the bag, forgive me, did I bring one out here? Tell you what, let me pause you. Let me go run and get it because I really want to show this to you. Let me go get one of the split lock washers, and I will be right back. One moment. Okay, and we're back. Sorry about that. Sorry for the delay. So what we ended up doing was, so again, M6 split lock washer on our bolt. Then we've got our bus bar here and our flat washer in order to give that bolt and that connector sitting on top of it some nice large purchase on this bus bar. And the reason why that is, let me grab another one of these Allen screws here, or bolts, whatever you want to call them. You'll notice that since that shoulder's not as wide, it does leave a little bit of a gap in there. So that's the reason why we put the washer on it. So we've got that, we've got that. Follow it up with this. So we got a bus bar, flat washer, terminal for our Longmon, and then finally our lock washer on top of it. With that particular setup, that gives us about 2 3/4 full turns on this particular stud to get everything tightened down. And so just by going by what we have on our battery bank, to me, what that gives me is a nice sturdy connection between this bus bar and this flat part of this terminal. A nice connection between the long mon. Let me just loosen this up so I can spin this the other direction. There we go. So you can see this a little bit better. A nice connection between the eyelet and that lower washer. And then the lock washer, nice connection between it, the shoulder of this hardware, and then of course this eyelet itself. So everything is nice compressed, locked together, should now be securely held in place thanks to our split lock washer. And what this should end up giving us for is a much sturdier connection than what we had in the past. Now, I'm not saying that those studs they gave you are wrong or inferior in any way. You know, to each their own. Again, until tonight, the majority of my bank, or I should say not majority, but all of my bank ran with these. It was just in some cases I had to put additional washers or lock washers or things of that nature to help improve that connection. And there are a lot of individuals out there that still use these. They're still valid. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I'm just stating that in our case, we're electing to try to do things a little bit different. Because one thing I like about using these as opposed to these is that I'm not tightening this in like this. And to be fair, this is a little bit longer than the ones that they give you stock. But I'm not having to, you know, hold this in. Let me pan you up here. Hold this in with an Allen key this way, while at the same time I tighten up that serrated flange nut on the other side. So it just makes it a bit more convenient that I can now do it with a single Allen key and be good. But again, I will have a link in the description. And this particular make, and again, they're stainless steel M6 10mm Allen screws or bolts, however you want to call it. But I'll put in these happen to come 50 in a pack. And they were relatively inexpensive. I mean, it was a pretty low cost for 50 of these things. But you're going to see me, again, I will cut into this video what it looks like in the battery bank with all of these studs being changed out. Again, inside the battery room, the battery bank has its own dedicated room that stays securely shut, with the exception unless we're in there doing something. So you'll see the tops of my batteries not currently covered. Again, they're not covered because we were going through changing all our hardware out. Don't worry. Once we get some runtime in on this new hardware and we get the additional batteries added into our battery bank, then I will come over with some covering at that point, and I'll cover over the tops of those batteries that you see. I forgot to mention it in the second half of this video, so I wanted to go ahead and mention that now. But like I said, we'll run it through its paces. Tonight, we'll drain the battery bank to about 70% state of charge. It should be about come morning, and it's supposed to be a good day tomorrow. So we should be seeing, like I say in the second clip, possibly anywhere between 70 and 75 charging amps because the rest of the power is running the house. So that should give us a nice good charge and discharge test with how these new fasteners will hold up. So that's a little bit long-winded update, but I wanted to put that out there that you know, we're still in the process of making solar videos. I know the channel's been dominated with the RAM 6.4 build, but my effort with this channel is to try to provide a varied content and not just necessarily focus on one thing consistently. I want to put stuff out there that's useful across a broad spectrum of possible questions, you know, / needs. So we'll continue on with the solar updates because I've got more stuff planned, more stuff I'd like to do videos of, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the second half of the clip that I'll splice in here. as well as, you know, the RAM builds that are also on the channel. Once we get the current build complete, I'm working on getting them some stuff in a pipeline to continue with that and do some differences there. So with that long-winded explanation being done, I'll cut it at this point, get this uploaded, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. And welcome back. So as we were talking about earlier, you can see on our battery bank here, we've went through and taken all of our studs out with these serrated flange nuts. We ended up doing things a little bit differently than what we were talking about earlier. You can see that we've got our bus bar, and then the first thing on the bus bar, we have a flat M6 stainless steel washer, standard washer. And then on top of that washer is the lug for the BMS for each long mon attached to the battery. And then on top of that is the split lock washer, and then finally the Allen bolt itself. So if you're going from the top, you've got Allen bolt, split lock washer, lug for the long mon, and then a flat washer underneath of it, just to give everything a nice, flat, wide footprint to sit on as far as the connection is concerned. So we're going to basically run this through its paces starting tonight. We'll run a percentage of the house off batteries. Usually when it starts getting into the colder months as it is, we'll run part of the house off batteries during the night for the night cycle, which usually takes them down to about a 70 to 75% state of charge. And then during the day, we'll run all of the house and the garage off solar, but also recharge the battery bank at the same time. So we should see charging currents upwards of 65, 70, possibly 75 amps tomorrow, which would be normal for us this time of year. Now that's in addition to running the house. If we weren't running the house, we would be 90 to 100 to 110 amps on some occasions. So we'll run these new connections through their cycles. Make sure that we don't have any issues with them getting hot, or any issues with, once the pack's under heavy load, of seeing one go considerably lower than the others, which is usually an indication, at least for our setup, that we've got a loose connection. So my hope is that switching over to these and not having to fidget with the stud and holding the stud in place, and then at the same time you're tightening the flange nut down, that'll permanently take care of any issues that we're having as far as connections. As far as the cells themselves, they've been performing flawlessly since they've been put into service. During the summer months, we will again usually drain the pack at night to about 70 to 80% state of charge, and then recover that during the day. So we've been doing that consistently since they've been put online, and all the cells have been fine. We thought that we had an issue with one of the cells about a month or so ago, which is why you see this lower brace. We loosened up and kind of pushed it to the bottom to get the cell out. I just haven't put this back up top yet. Is that it was reading off by the long mon. So what would happen was the pack would be 50 to 60% amp draw, and all of a sudden our cell ID 30 would be sometimes 5 and 10 millivolts below the rest of the pack. In other words, significantly lower than the rest of the cells in the bank. So we substituted out with a spare that we had. We took what was cell 30 and put it under a charge-discharge test cycle 4 times in a row, and it still tested at 280 amp hours with no issues. So that tells me cell 30 in this case, you'll see here, which now says 33 because it was replaced. This cell, the reason why it was reading a little bit off and appearing to charge faster and discharge faster than the rest of the pack was just due to more than likely a bad connection issue, because this cell's been fine since it was replaced, because we obviously would have disconnected it, reconnected it, and tightened everything back up when we reconnected it, and that coupled with the fact that when we tested the old cell, it tested fine. So with that being said, that's the status update on those. Again, working just fine, absolutely no issue. And what we're going to start doing is if you remember these cells that we took out of service when we put the 280 amp hour cells into service, these are these Fortune 100 amp hour cells. Very good cells. If you remember the testing videos we did earlier, after having these in service for, I believe it was about 10 months straight, daily discharges and recharges, they're still testing at or above the rated capacity. Now, they're only 100 amp hour cells, but we have enough cells to make up two 100 amp hour banks, which will give us another 200 amp hour capacity that we will add to this existing bank. So it'll bring us from 560 amp hours to 760 amp hours once we're complete. So we're going to start the process just like we would with any cell. We're going to start getting these charged up. We're going to hook them in parallel. We're going to let them top balance. Once we get all 16 top balanced, I'll get the other 16 top balanced. Then we'll hook all 32 cells together in parallel. We'll let them set that way for a little while just to get kind of even with each other. Then we'll break them up, make 2 packs of 16, and add them into this bank the same way we did the 280 amp hour 16 cell banks that you see here, with the exception of these won't be under compression because they don't require it. You'll notice that when we were looking at these earlier, that these Fortune cells are made deliberately to have a gap between them, and the holders that you fasten in place actually won't let you compress these. And I don't find anything in the manual or literature for these that say they even require the compression, probably due to the way they have the case constructed, because these are meant for EV use. Again, just you can see that there by how beefy those posts are to this battery. Again, they're meant for high rates of discharge and high rates of charge, which will be more, again, there was more than sufficient for what we used it for. Like I said, they're good cells, so we're just going to put them back into service. And that will give us a fair bit of capacity that we can run even a larger percentage of the house at night and then just recover that charge during the day while we're running 100% of the house. So with that being said, that was just a little bit of an update for you, and we'll bring you back once we get these top balanced and ready to put back into service, and we'll just show you how we handle that process when we're mixing different capacity banks together. And I'll talk to you later.